Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 2 of Hit and Run. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're picking up immediately after last episode. Cops show up, find Segev with a gun on him, as well as no body. There's no blood or anything. Even later on with when Talia and her unit or whatever end up testing the crime scene, they can't find any fingerprints except for Segev's at the on the gun. Can't even find any blood. So it's obviously. So I was wondering about that. I was like, well, they wouldn't have probably had enough time to clean up on the blood. But it's no. I figured there had to be some trace amounts. But it's no. This is a really good professional squad. So it was a full, thorough cleanup. It's yeah, we left the crime scene the way it is because I guess it's if we leave it the way it is, we can make it seem like he was just crazy. Especially because a boss is kind of for one, it's yo, I know he's your cousin and everything, which clarifies that because I was wondering if Talia was his sister, but it's no, cousin. And it's but you know who he used to be because even the questions kind of came up about because it's when they were questioning Segev at one point in time about the guy he quote unquote killed, it's was it someone you knew? He was no. Do you have even wondering because he was saying why would anyone want to come after me? I'm just a regular tour guide or whatever. And they're you weren't just a tour. I was oh, okay. Because I was wondering, it did seem like you were pretty skilled the way you took that dude down. So I was military stuff. And this episode kind of answers the question that at one point in time he was part of the military. What and all that he did with the military. It seems more so we're going to be focusing more about what he did after the military, but we'll kind of get into that later on. But even being oh, what was Danielle's connection to Rami? It's why would I don't know Rami. I know of his reputation and stuff like that. I don't know the dude. I wonder is that true or not. But also why would Danielle know him? So obviously they're trying to cover all their bases, considering who he is. Maybe they were wondering if maybe Danielle had some business with him in the sense of maybe she brought drugs from him or something. Maybe that's what they were kind of hinting at. But other interesting elements is you have Segev asking Sid about the whole Asif situation. These texts and stuff like that. She's I'm sorry, I can't help you. I'm wow, you're lying to his face. Well, because I guess it kind of makes sense because you're kind of stuck. At first, it's well, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because you want to tell Segev the truth, but also it's right, if you admit everything that went on, the affair and everything. I mean, granted, we don't. The text kind of imply that's still been going on. To what extent, we don't know. But she gets kind of called out when Segev noticed her looking at someone, and it's Asif. He showed up at the funeral. I'm why would you do that? That's not. But I guess it's right. He doesn't know what I look like, so I don't have to worry about it. But then Segev followed after him, and then Sid was yeah, the reason why I didn't tell you, it's they dated a little while ago. That was before you guys got together. And the fact is that she broke things off, but obviously he became a little obsessed, so she's putting it all on him. Until we get her at the bar that she had told Segev about, where it's hey, why'd you show up at the funeral? He's forget that tour guide dude, whatever. He's he was basically I had the right to grieve too. And she was basically don't underestimate Segev, because it seems Sid knows about his past, but Asif doesn't. He probably legit is oh, he's just some some tour guide or whatever. That's all he is. It's no, there's more to him than that, obviously. But the fact that Sid's talking to him like that, Segev was waiting outside for Asif, but I think it's Sid made sure to show up there before Segev. Maybe she knew Segev was going to be there soon enough, so she was let me get here beforehand. Just I don't know. Or maybe she was, just that conversation, it seems she's a lot more in the know about this. Because she says that whole line to Segev earlier, at the funeral and everything, be oh, please don't hate me or whatever. You guys are my best friends. I just didn't want to cause issues. And he was I don't hate you. But it's she definitely isn't just the whole friend of oh, I know what's going on. It seems she might be deeper in this than you kind of. I don't know. She just seems suspicious. Maybe she is just trying to play the friend angle of maybe she is trying to be a good friend but she takes Segev there later on because some stuff had come up about or not unless it was a different bar, but I would assume it was the same bar. It was later on. She's she recognizes the guys when their pictures are kind of put out there. We'll get to that later, but she recognized them and like took him to the bar and everything. I was like, yeah, like this is, I didn't even realize it till their pictures are out there, but like, oh, those are the guys that, yeah, I saw them like a couple days before Danielle died. Like, the fact is that we were in a bar celebrating, and then like we noticed those guys. She's like, I didn't even think about it till like their picture, and just like that's plausible, but it just seems like too convenient, in my opinion. It's just a little too convenient. You just happen to, like I said, it's just, she's super like on my like. I don't know how deeply involved she is in all of this. Like, the fact is that it seems like she's tight enough with Asif that it's like for her to talk to him like that. So there's definitely something going on there. Granted, Asif doesn't have the easiest time either, because his wife found a letter that Sid had given him at some point in time, and it seems like an affair has already been something they've gone through before, and now it's like, right, I should have, like, I wanted to believe you, I kind of like ignore the voices in my head warning me about this. And he was like, the fact is, he's like, I don't know, maybe she wrote that letter to me because she was still in love with me, which is such BS, considering you're the one that was texting her like, oh, why are you ignoring me, yada yada yada. Maybe, once again, I don't know if this is legitimately like a oh man, there's some like covert stuff going on that he's involved in, that Danielle's involved in. I don't know. Like, that was my immediate thought last episode, but I don't know. There just seems to be like, like I said, there might be some covert stuff related to both of them, but I don't know. Especially because it seems like later on, it seems like he might have gotten kidnapped, because like someone was at his house and like potentially grabbed him, but he had clarified stuff with his wife beforehand. It's like, you don't have to worry about it. The person that I was having the affair with is the American woman that died in a car accident. And then later on, when those guys' pictures got put all over the news and stuff like that, it didn't seem like he recognized them. It just seemed like, I think he does legitimately just think it's an accident. So I don't think he thinks much of it. I just don't know. But speaking of those dudes, it turns out, like, because I was wondering, like, oh, did Rami, like, take the fall for it or something like that? It's like, no, he kept expressing his innocence, being like, I was away, I was dropping my kid off, and then, like, someone stole the car, my daughter's iPad was in there, and later on, Tali ends up tracing the iPad, and they end up finding the car, and they get it on surveillance footage, but it's not Rami driving it. In fact, it turns out it's two people with, who seem to be Hungarian nationals, that immediately left out, because it's like, wait, did they come here just party, things went out of hand and they bailed? But it's like they immediately like went to London or something like that. So, and also you have Tali's boss taking her off the case, which I'm like, is it simply the thing of, hey, you really are too close to this, because it could compromise the case, because this is a family thing, so you don't want to jeopardize the case when it comes to like potentially putting these people on trial, so her boss takes her off the case. It seemed like in particular, this really came about because Segev kept showing up at the precinct, like, because Tali was giving him up-to-date, updates about everything that they were looking into. Another suspicious angle for me in this episode involves Danielle's family, because like the ritual, like which it's a very, I guess, a very specific like burial, because it had to be done within like 24 hours. You know, I'm ignorant on that in the subject, but Segev was like, "Oh, Martin, are you guys at the airport?" He's like, "No, like I don't think Martin's Danielle's brother. I think that's her brother-in-law, and I think it's like Marcia or whatever. I think that might be her sister. Maybe not. Like, that's definitely that Danielle's family side of things. But like I said, I think Martin's her. Maybe it's her brother, but it might be her. I really believe it to be like her brother-in-law. And but he was, once again, I always feel bad for that actor, because he always plays him like really like sketchy dude. Like, the one time I'd probably say he isn't too much of a sketchy dude was probably in The Killing. That might be the one time, but more often than not, he plays like some douchey, like kind of like, I don't know about it. Like, he always ends up, I feel like he gets typecast as those characters, but he definitely seems like a very suspicious character in this regard, because it's like, yeah, she came down with something, like, oh, she fainted. They think she might have pneumonia, so I'm sorry. We'll potentially have like a little thing for her, for Danielle, here, you know, family, friends. You should come, Segev, when you get the chance. And I'm like, the fact is that, because even later on, Segev's mom, it's like, I don't understand that family. Like, the only thing that would keep me from my child's funeral is if I died too. And it's like, even Segev be like, I don't understand him either. But it's like, part of me is like, did he not tell the rest of the family what happened to Danielle? I mean, because, you know, it's on the news there, but it's still probably local news. I wonder, is it also her being an American that probably makes that even more of a thing? Because obviously they keep pointing it out like, oh, an American, they make a note of it, because I think, like, I mean, maybe they still would treat it like that if it was just someone like a local, but it's like the fact is that she is specifically American. Maybe that's why they keep referencing that, because that makes it kind of stand out even more. But regardless, like I said, just that whole Martin thing's got me super suspicious. So it's like, you don't really know who you can 100% trust, because everyone just seems a little bit off under these circumstances. It's like, that side of things seem off, the whole Asif situation, and Sid seemed like that whole thing just seems off. Especially when we end up finding out Segev ended up chasing after the drug dealer who worked who was like at that bar, which he was immediately lying, being like, that was my first time ever at the bar. And then Segev proceeded to beat the ever living shit out of him, even like hitting him with that metal gate or whatever. And it's like, okay. He's like, I was selling to those Americans. And it's like, wait, Americans? He's like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. So I'm like, wait. They're supposed to be Hungarian, but then it's like, okay. So it turns out they're Americans that used like fake passports. They didn't actually go to London. They actually were going to New York. So they faked all of that to kind of cover their tracks a little well, because all of that started piecing together for Segev that this isn't some like random, like, all these guys like killed someone and they left the country. It's like, no, this was a professional hit. Which could feel so bad, because like earlier he kind of chewed Moshe like out, because he was lashing at him, because it's like, why'd you even stop for a cup of coffee? Like, my wife ended up dying because, he's like, why'd you even stop? And he's like, I don't know. We had plenty enough time. Plus, she was also about, I think it was actually her suggestion, wasn't it? Like, wasn't she the one that's like, I'll get a. No, like, I think he was going to get it, but then she offered to get it herself, because she was like, oh, get me one. Or maybe it was the other way. I'm blanking on it now. Like, it might have been her suggestion, or at the very least, she can like suggested going to get it. So I'm assuming they were following the entire time, and they were just waiting until she came out to really like hit her. Like I'm assuming in that regard. I don't know. They're also setting up those lights. You know, because like, right, it needs to light up the driveway and stuff like that, which I love how that does ultimately like come back full circle later on, because the moment like Segev comes back home with Tali, it's like, she's like, oh man, it's kind of dark in here. He was like, wait, what? Like, he's like, they just installed those lights previously, and it turns out they're cut. Someone had like booby trapped the door. Luckily, all that kind of gave him the heads up necessary. Luckily, Tali is okay at the end of all of this, but all of this had gotten Segev thinking that this might be related to someone from his past, a dude named Isaac, because he calls up his buddy Ron, who's in New York. Is like, wait, Isaac's in jail. He's like, dude, like, Danielle, it wasn't an accident. It might have been a hit, like, because for him, and once again, I'm still with the perspective of, I think there was more going on with Danielle, but currently Segev is thinking that this has to deal with him, that this is his past, because at one point him and Tali were talking about it, and it's like he had expressed like, I believe this is about me, and she's like, why? He's like, you know what I did, like, because even Boz had brought it up earlier about like his time in Mexico. Like, it seems like it's not 100% clear what he got mixed up in, but it seems like there was some shady stuff that went down in Mexico, and it turns out Isaac got arrested because of whatever it was. I don't know whether they like, not unless it was one of those things of like, okay, we took our military training, like, and we tried to do like some like robbing somebody type of thing of like, we did some like super illegal stuff, using our military training to try and get paid, or something. Like maybe they got paid to do some wet work type of thing. Like I don't know. Like I'm kind of just throwing stuff out there, seeing ultimately what ends up sticking. But going to Mexico after leaving the army, it just makes me feel like oh, you were hired for like some private work, some maybe some private security type of stuff, but whatever it was, it went wrong. Isaac ended up in jail, and he blamed Segev, and Segev thinks like, yeah, like, because even Ron's like, but the guy's in jail. It's like, Segev's like, yeah, but you and I both know Isaac is crazy, so it's totally possible for him to do this, because Ron ended up using his, he's like, he talks to a dude, he's like, yeah, you still work at Sing Sing, right? Like, and they ended up finding out that Isaac had gotten released like 6 months prior or something like that. So currently that's where things stand, but I still believe that maybe they're connected, maybe they're unrelated, that this is sending Segev down a very specific path, but the fact is that he's actually, that this has to deal with Danielle. And just because when Danielle saw those guys, the look on her face in that flashback made it seem like she immediately recognized him. I mean, it's like, oh, I don't want to deal with assholes tonight, but it's like, that didn't just seem like oh, creeps. Like, she would have joked around if it was Sid, being like, oh, those guys are such weird, why are they standing there? It's like, I think she immediately recognized him, and once again, Sid could be lying, just because I don't 100% trust her, dude. It just seems like that conversation with Asif just makes me, like, uneasy. Even the fact is, even when he got confronted by Segev, like, he's like, yeah, like, if I were you, I'd be more concerned about this. You've got considering the situation, it seems like there's a lot more going on than, like, you have a lot more to worry about than who was fucking your wife or something like that. He said it very callously and stuff like that, but I'm like, that's what made me think, like, he knew more was going on, but later on stuff makes me feel like it wasn't. I don't know. Like, I guess just in general, I guess he's kind of implying, like, yeah, there was a lot more to your wife. Like, maybe he still believes it to be an accident, but maybe he knows, like, no, there's definitely more to Danielle than even you knew. But, like, he had a gun in his face, and it's like, he was like, oh, no. It's like, he was just so, like, yeah, I fucked your wife. And then he kind of moved the gun out of the way. That's why I'm like, he don't seem like a regular dude. Especially, interestingly enough, because we also got introduced to, like, Tali's ex. And we find out, like, oh, he left the police department behind, and he's kind of working more on, what was it, like, cyber private security, or just private security in general, that I'm like, that was just like a small scene in the episode. I'm like, is there, maybe, like, Tali's going to hit him up later on about help with all of this, but don't quite sure know what to make of everything. Like, a lot's still kind of getting thrown at us, and we're still kind of kept in the dark. Obviously, this is something they're going to slowly unveil as the season continues to progress. But there was even that moment later on when Ella was looking for, like, yeah, we can't find a family album, and it's like, he's like, it's in this particular place. She's like, no, it's not. And she was like, Dad, can you help me look for it? And I'm like, the moment that kept coming up, I was like, did that get stolen? Because they don't make a point of it other than, like, her saying that. Like, maybe it got placed somewhere else. And because we don't even get a scene of Sega being like, oh, I'll help you find it. It's like, that's as far as we got, is her asking him for help again and looking for it. But I'm like, did it actually get stolen? But where things currently stand, Segev has decided he's going to go to New York. It's like, this all won't end until he finishes things with Isaac. Maybe next episode we get a little more insight, like kind of flashbacks potentially to what went down, or maybe that comes up later on in the season. But even Tali being like, is this really a good idea? Even he's like, no, but the only way I'm going to make sure that this is all over, that, Ella can be okay, that this will all get resolved, is if I handle it myself and kind of deal with Isaac once and for all. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see how this all plays out going forward into the next episode. I'm very interested to see what happens. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.